Hello, Escape Collective podcast listener. I'm Dane Cash, and I'm pretty serious about bike racing, so you can imagine just how excited I get this time of year, what with the Tour de France and all. And I'm also excited for you, because if you sign up to join Escape Collective right now, your first month will only cost $1. That means you'll get full access to all of our bike racing news and analysis, tech coverage, and everything else in between here on podcast channels and also over the website. So you can expect us to be pretty busy over the next few months, and if you want to read or listen to what we have to say without hitting paywalls or missing members-only episodes of our podcasts, or if you want to talk bikes with the rest of our awesome community on our Discord server, it's a pretty awesome opportunity to join up. Plus, you'll be supporting everything we're doing here, and we really and truly cannot do this without your support. Head on over to escapecollective.com/TDF to sign up, and remember, if you do it now, your first month will only cost you $1. Hello and welcome back to the How the Race Was Won podcast. It's the second rest day of the Tour de France. Whew, what a last few stages it has been at the 2024 Tour. Bike racing analyst extraordinaire Cosmo Catalano. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm reveling in the vibe shifts, the constant shifting of the vibe. Over these past couple
days.
The
narratives, constant shifting.
Yeah, it's a kind of a tribute to the race, I think, that these differences are the result on any given day is not tremendously remarkable, but the amount of impact it seems to have on the way people talk about the race as a whole is huge. And
yeah, definitely. And the way that the prognosticators view what's going to happen as well, including the people who make money off of it. We'll get to that in a bit. That narrative has changed dramatically multiple times in the last few days. So we're sitting here. We watched stage 15 today. We're recording on Sunday evening, and it's going to go out on Monday during the rest day. And we watched the stage 15 where Tadej Pogačar, landed a decisive blow in the mountains, in the Pyrenees. That was what we saw today. And we've got a whole week, 6 days, to talk about since our last show. And a lot's changed since then. And we're going to talk about all of those things, both in the GC battle and also in the sprints, because we saw some interesting sprint battles. We saw constant relegations. That's interesting. And I know, Cosmo, that you have opinions about relegation.
A little bit of opinion. I mean, the thing is, we can talk about it later, but it's hard to have an opinion.
Yeah. And meanwhile, while that's going on in France, the Women's Giro ended over in Italy. That happened over the course of the last week as well, week and change. So it's been a very busy week for high-end bike racing. Very exciting week for high-end bike racing. And we'll talk about what happened at the Tour. We'll talk about a little bit about what happened at the Giro. And as usual, we'll kind of throw it over to Wheel Talk to do more of that. They've been having pretty amazing daily shows over on Wheel Talk, which is really great. They've gotten riders in the race, several riders every day checking in. Yeah, and then we will look ahead to the final week of the 2024 Tour de France, which will hopefully be as entertaining as the last few stages have been here in the second week.
Don't jinx it.
We'll see. Might be tough to reach the same heights, especially now that a lead has been established the way that it has. We'll get to that.
Last year's race got jinxed. People jinxed it. I'm not doing it. This year.
Even by saying that word, though, you might have already done it. That's the baseball fear. You can't even say the word.
Really?
All right, that's what we're going to talk about the show today. Thanks for joining us. Let's get to it. Cosmo, what is the headline of the last week at the Tour de France?
I'm struggling to settle on one. Like I said, it kind of like the vibe shift is almost kind of what I want to lean into. We have people when you win two consecutive. Let's stick to that. I'm going to do headline. I'm going to get a headline out of this. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
I want like 70 characters or less.
So,
fewer.
yeah. I mean, it's got to be big in print.
Well, the tricky thing, and I think you're hinting at this, is that there's, you can make a headline for today's stage, but does that encapsulate everything that's happened over the week? I don't know. That's tricky.
Well, and the thing is, I think part of what made these past two stages so remarkable is that I think people were coming in with a certain sense of inevitability. But maybe the inevitable is never inevitable. I don't know. I feel really silly going with an inevitability concept when there's still an extra week to go, and again with the J and X that I don't want to do.
That's true. Let's in that case, why don't you tell me and also the listeners how the race has been won over the past 6 stages?
Okay. I think we started on 10, right? Yeah.
Yes, that is accurate, because stage 9 was the last day before the rest day.
Stage 10, we had a lot of wish echelon, a lot of people trying to will echelons into happening, and they did not. We had a pretty straightforward sprint day with no real day-long break. And Vanderpool, it's one of those like goal line plays where American football metaphor. The offensive line opens a hole so big that you think that you could literally run through it and score a touchdown. I think this is the closest I've ever seen it in cycling, certainly in the modern peloton without a big lead-out train. It really just dropped him off at the front of the race. He would have to do something real dumb to not win the sprint. And Philipsen won the sprint. Just beautiful.
I so often talk about how getting dropped off too early is...
Oh, we'll talk about that later.
Of a sprinter's existence.
We saw that happen.
This is the opposite of that. I mean, they dropped him off at the point so perfect where to even come around him, there wasn't even enough room to really come around him at the finish line. It was just perfect lead out. Good job, Alpecin. All right, that was stage 10. Stage 11. Stage
11, we got another big show of force from UAE, which we've seen early in tours a lot. Pogačar attacked us at 31.5K from the finish, which sounds like a lot, but it was kind of up and down. So it sort of made sense if he was trying to maximize his time gain. Vingegaard responded, but didn't catch the wheel, and it was 7 seconds over the top. And it's hard to really piece together how the descent went because we got intercut footage with a big party for Romain Bardet finishing up his career, kind of hugging the crowd. And I don't think he got fined for that. But yeah, we had basically a second group formed with Vingegaard. Clearly, he and Roglic were a little bit above the rest of the group and went clear the second they went the next climb. It was about 37 seconds for Pogačar at that point. And Vingegaard rode with Roglic for a little bit and then broke away. And again, that sense of grinding inevitability made his way up to Pogačar, caught him right before the KOM. Pogačar took the KOM, but Vingegaard right there. They go over another climb. And this time, Vingegaard is in charge over the top of this climb. It's only a Cat 3, but clearly is unchallenged. They come down to the finish. It's a 2-up sprint. The Pogačar should win. Literally has never lost one.
I thought the inevitability here was that Pogačar was going to win the sprint.
Well, I think for this stage, this was, Pogačar trying to do those less expected things to get time. And it looked like he had done it, and he didn't do it. And then, in fact, Vingegaard won the stage. And despite the fact that Pogačar had gone for all these bonuses, Vingegaard ended up gaining a second on GC on a day where UAE made a huge investment. And Pogačar looked strong. And Vingegaard brought him back. It just had that real sense of this is the inescapable result. Once again, we have Vingegaard defeating Pogačar.
Yeah, and in terms of the investment, I mean, we talked a fair bit about this in our WhatsApp group. We have a Tour de France, basically a bunch of editors, and so we're talking with Kaylee and company on the ground, and we're all WhatsApping back and forth. And I think we could debate over how much energy Vingegaard versus Pogačar were putting in, and whether Vingegaard really put in that much less energy than Pogačar just because Pogačar did that initial attack. You could debate that, but I think the clear thing, though, is that UAE as a team did put a lot into it. They put a lot of their riders on the front. And then when Pogačar attacked, he dropped a bunch of his own teammates, out of the GC battle, basically. Not out of the top 10, but just they're no longer a threat to Vingegaard. So any chance that they would have had to scare Vingegaard by sending, for instance, João Almeida up the road, that gets lessened by their decision to do this. So that was sort of an inescapable price that they were paying to try to apply pressure to Vingegaard, and it didn't work because Vingegaard took the stage.
The way Wiesmann's been talking about this race is that they're coming in expecting to lose time, and they'll get it back at some later point. And this felt like a big victory for them, even if the actual gains were small, because we're still pretty early in the race, not even about halfway through. And I guess just over halfway through. And, they got this 1 second back. And it's like, you got the sense that this was the turning point, right? This was Gettysburg.
They had stopped the bleeding. The high water mark of the Pogacar Tour de France.
Pickett's charge. That's what I was looking for.
One other note. If you're listening to this podcast, you're serious enough about bike racing that you certainly know that Primož Roglič has since abandoned the Tour de France. In my head, when you said Roglic's name a minute ago, when you're talking about the chase, I did have a moment of, oh yeah, that's right, he was in the Tour.
He was there. He was active. He was useful. Yeah. He was.
It saddens me.
It saddens me, but at the same time, he kind of crashed on his own on the last descent of the stage. I think actually got us same time because he was so close to the finish when he crashed.
Yep,
which
he did.
Speaking of the group chat, elicited some response there.
I wrote in the following day's report, because I wrote the report on escapecollective.com, which you should check out if you haven't already, listeners. Because the following day he had another crash. And as I pointed out, because he got the same time as Evenepoel on stage 11, even though he crashed late. But when the cycling gods giveth, they also taketh away. They do. And that's what happened on stage 12.
They taketh away on a kind of a silly routing decision, I think, by the Tour. It's a pretty narrow road with a traffic calming mechanism. It's sort of like a median curb, a curb in the center of the road. It is, in theory, if you are riding alone, probably pretty easy to ride over it and not have a crash. If you're in a bunch of people riding very fast, very close together, it is really hard to hit it at the right angle to get up on it instead of sliding against it. And we saw a Smistana rider, maybe Ballerini, I don't remember. This one guy clips it just the wrong way and spins out, and everybody's on each other's shoulders, on each other's wheels. A bunch of people crash, go off the side of the road, including Primož Roglič. We ended up with a kind of a reduced group sprint, and this was another example of a lead out that worked out really well, but it was kind of the opposite in terms of grace with Van der Poel's, right? Van der Poel is like what you write in a textbook. This was chaos. Basically, Biniam Girmay of Intermarché is the only rider to make it in front of this crash that happened about 12K to go. And various Intermarché riders battled their way back up, including Mike Tunison, who just like in this scrum of carnage, like there's 30 riders maybe in this front group. People are going all over the place, left and right. He gets to this group, catches onto it after a huge chase, finds Beanie, like kind of elbows his way in front of Beanie, like pulls him up the side of the road from being not in a great spot to being in a definitely winnable spot. Girmay wins the sprint. A bunch of people behind him get relegated, including Arnaud Démare, who like kind of came back from the dead to finish second on this for what I think was maybe kind of a chintzy call. He rode close to the barriers. I would say less than one Van Aert from the barriers, but also the barriers weren't in a straight line, and he was already in front of Van Aert. And, it would be really hard for him to keep precisely 1.1 Van Aerts from those barriers and still race a bike. But I found
this to be overly harsh.
Yes,
this relegation.
I think a lot of people did. I thought Cav's relegation was bad too, because he's sprinting. He is moving with the field, and there's a lead out guy from Arkea like drifting back through the field, and Mark Cavendish goes around him like any sane person would. Your two options are crash into the back of this guy, which is a terrible way to crash. Might be one of the worst ways to crash, I think, because one guy's not expecting it and the other guy is going full speed and he's definitely going to endo. Or he slams on the brakes and then everyone behind Cavendish smashes in the back of Cavendish. Like, you really need to have motion in a sprint that goes from side to side. That's just how it is.
Yeah, I mean, like literally, if you're ever going to come around anyone at all, there's no other. You have to go around.
Yes, yeah. It's not Zwift. Like, your avatar doesn't pass through another. It's not how it works. And I understand what the Tour is trying to do. I think they're doing it wrong, and I've been thinking this for years. I think the UCI needs real sprint rules. I think the riders who are actually doing the sprinting should be involved in it, because there are, these guys aren't shy about talking about what they think is legit and not legit in a sprint, and getting that information up to people who make the rules, and kind of getting everyone together saying what is going to be a good way where we can let people race bikes and we can actually consistently enforce rules so that we have safety, we have predictable behavior, without making it, like a trolley race where everyone's stuck to a track, and if you're not in the front of the track, like, you can't do anything.
Yeah. So Gramai there took his third stage win, thereby further extending his points classification lead. What happened the next day?
Next day we got actual splits, I think. Am I wrong about that? There were win splits, for real. Like, we got the magical echelons appeared, kind of. I don't know if they were full echelons, but we got a group that was split up.
That did happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we had, I think, a lot of crashes on the run-in that really sort of reduced the group. And then we had Christophe Laporte doing a great lead-out about 150 meters, 100 meters too early for Wout van Aert. It was great. I mean, it was almost a carbon copy of what we saw on stage 10, except wrong.
Yeah, too early.
Just not the. I don't know if Laporte overmeasured himself or they miscommunicated, but it was very. You see Laporte kind of pull off, do his lead out, pull off, and Van Aert is just like kind of looks sideways and is like, okay, who's coming up? How can I relaunch this? How can I do this?
It was the opposite of launching.
Yeah,
but Laporte pulled off, and Van Aert's just, I don't really want to go yet. So
it was a great example of what Dane Cash always says, which is it's better to get no lead out than a bad lead out.
Right, and Biniam Girmay, Tunisian has done a nice job at points, but Girmay surfing wheels, Cavendish surfing wheels, shows you just how effective you can be without a lead out. And Laporte dropping you off too early, and this also has happened to Demar as well. Got dropped off a little early. He was then relegated anyway, so it didn't matter. But anyway, the eventual winner was unfortunately for Wout van Aert, not Wout van Aert.
No, it was Jasper Philipsen with his second win. It's tough to do better, I think, than what he did last year. But he's keeping his name in the conversation. I still think Girmay is looking really good for green. Knock on wood.
For the points, yeah.
But he's keeping it respectable. People aren't wondering what happened to Jasper Philipsen.
Yeah, it's absolutely. Let's talk about it in a bit. Let's talk about the talking points, because I think there's a couple for the sprinters in a bit. But let's talk those last two stages, the mountain stages, and how they were won first. So stage 14, we had a big mountain battle.
We had a breakaway. We had a breakaway. Let's stop it.
Well,
we had a breakaway.
We did. I mean, there have been breakaways.
But I mean, this was a breakaway that lasted, right?
Almost.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. Pouring one out for my homies, Oyo Lascano, Ben Healy. It was a great break. Very, very fun to watch. Wanted to pull for him. You knew they didn't have enough time. Got another kind of big UAE day, and Wiesma looking a little thin. And we saw something very unusual, which was Adam Yates attacking solo out of the group at 7.2K to go. And so no one really kind of knows what to do with this. Like, obviously, he's not a threat to win the race, but someone's still got to keep the pace up, right? So you see Matteo Jorgensen go to the front, and then Pogacar attacks at 4.6K to go. Bridges across the Yates, gets that pole. Vingegaard can't really respond. He tries. He definitely limits the losses as much as he could, but it is 39 seconds on the clock at the line plus some bonus.
Yep.
So pretty big statement, I think, from Pogacar that day.
Yeah, but it was a moment where, a couple of things. I mean, first of all, UAE, to me, Johnny had a story about how they said their tactics are basically, well, we're in the lead, so we're just going to attack. And I think this was an example of like, well, clearly they're thinking about it a little bit more than that. They're a little more tactical than that. Of course they are. But this is a good example of it. However, Vingegaard didn't lose that much. I mean, it was a big loss, but not an insurmountable loss.
Well, you call it all. I think he lost this much time at least once in last year's tour.
Yeah, there were moments in last year's tour where we had this back and forth, and I think this was a back and forth moment where we'd seen Vingegaard take a stage win. Pogacar took a stage win, and then we come out of that stage thinking, all right, well, he'll have a chance the next day, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and we definitely saw Wiesma go at the day like that was the plan. We saw a lot of Wiesma. We did not see a lot of UAE. We saw Vingegaard attack 10.5K out from the finish. I don't know if that was planned or if that was more a Jorgensen was done with this pole and he didn't.
Yeah, I think we really saw the lack of Sepp Kuss today, Sunday, the stage 15, where Jorgensen was up there, did remarkably solid work that he should be praised for, but
it's just not. This is not his He's a great second or third guy. I don't think he's the last guy. I don't think he's the
exactly.
He still had the group down to 9 people.
He did, and he finished ahead of some guys. But yeah, in the end, it was just Vingegaard went from really far out,
and
then he just pulled.
Yeah, I mean, with Pogačar, like, I don't think I've ever seen him be able to respond to a Vingegaard attack the way he did. It was very much normally when you see them attack, it's Pogačar attacking and Vingegaard responding, and you see Pogačar attack inhumanly strong. Like, this is like a classics, like he's going up La Redoute or something. Like, he's going to be doing this for 5 minutes. Like, it looks super, super strong. And you see Vingegaard kind of pop out of the line wherever he is behind it, like go usually around a couple dudes because Pogačar likes to make it hard to follow him. And he'll get to his wheel, and they'll kind of sit and look at each other, and maybe it'll happen again. And this was, Vingegaard went, and Pogačar didn't even stand up. Like, I watched the footage. He just sat there and just went faster somehow. Like, barely even changed his cadence. It was like, I had a thread about it. It was basically like, it was like Terminator. Like, he fired the shotgun straight into him, and like, Terminator just kept coming.
Yeah. Yeah, he didn't seem at all phased. And I think there was a moment. There was another moment later, but there was a moment early on when Vingegaard had attacked, and he looked back after about 10 seconds, and I would have loved to just know exactly what he was thinking at that moment, because I am assuming that he's thinking, when I turn around, maybe Pogačar's not right here, maybe he's a few feet behind me,
Mm-hmm.
No, he was right there, didn't even get out of the saddle.
No, it was very much like he didn't know what to do. He basically pulled for like 4K.
It was,
So we talk about tactics, just use it as a blanket term, but there, people who take military things seriously, like, tactics are things that happen kind of like on the ground the day of the battle. Like, how are you going to win the battle? And there's like strategy, which is kind of a bigger, what is the plan for your overall offensive? And I think Visma is really good at strategy. I think they had a really good strategy for today, and then they ended up in a tactical situation they weren't prepared for. Yes. And they couldn't really do anything, right? Like, they had made this big investment in getting these two guys clear on the front. And what were they going to do? Sit up and let everyone else catch back up, throw that work away? So you just had Vingegaard pulling Pogačar, and then around 5.6K, he stands up, and it doesn't even really look that much like an attack. I was trying to figure out whether he was attacking or just like maybe trying to shift the muscle groups he was working. But I definitely, hearing Pogačar's interview afterwards, it definitely seemed like it did go faster, because he said he was on the limit for a little bit, for like a couple seconds, and then realized that like Vingegaard was trying to attack him, he wasn't getting anywhere, and he needed to counter right away. Countered right away, and yeah, that was it. Like, the gap was instant. There was really no response from Vingegaard.
And still quite far from the finish.
This is a climb where you can, historically, I think things do kind of go longer because it tends to flatten out at the top.
It does, yeah. The end is flatter.
There's a cross-country ski area instead of a downhill ski area. Fun fact. But there was, at no point did it look like Vingegaard was going to come back or Pogačar was going to blow up. Pogačar rode the race he wanted to ride, got the gap, and just drove it all the way to the line. He did celebrate, but as he was throwing the bike, it wasn't like a big sit up and like basket all in. He's
done a good job with that. By the way,
yeah.
I've been impressed that he hasn't wasted time, 100 meters before the line. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 108 or 109 at the line to Vingegaard,
and then the bonus seconds as well.
Yep.
So. Yeah.
But behind them, it was 250 something.
Yeah, the difference was stark. Yes.
And then who knows?
And then behind Remco, another minute.
Yeah.
To Remco's
a teammate, though. So who may
true.
not have been going as hard as he could go to keep that gap small. But.
Which is something I want to talk about. But let's take a break now and then come back and talk about some of the wider talking points that we have uncovered here. All right, so let's talk about some of the sprint battles and where the sprinters stand first. Chronologically, that happened first. A lot of these sprint battles. I want to highlight a few things. So first of all, I want to say that I felt a little vindicated, if you will, about Philipsen.
Fair.
And I think that after the two stages that he won, I feel like he has shown us that he is the fastest sprinter at the Tour still. I don't think that's changed. I think if you if you do 100 drag races, he's still going to win most of them.
Oh, that's pretty hedged. Most.
Yeah, it is hedged because the next thing I'm going to say is that I still think his positioning is suspect.
Well, I just wanted you to put a number on how many of 100 drag races would you win.
Oh, yeah, okay. If it's a bunch, basically, I'm thinking like a flat finish, open road, no chicane in the last 300 meters, something like that. I think he wins. I don't know, 60% of those.
All right.
But the thing is, if he doesn't have a great lead out, he has shown that he can kind of get swamped. And in the stage that he didn't win in this past week, it was because he was way too far back. He was coming up on his left side of the road on the stage that he didn't win this week. So let's see, he won stages 10 and 13 this week. And on stage 12, he finished fourth. And it was on stage 12 that he was pretty far back in the group because Van der Poel was not there to help him. And he was coming on quite quickly, but he just ate wind for so long that he didn't really have a chance to execute. And so, yeah, this is my long-winded way of saying I think he's the fastest sprinter in the world, but I think he also isn't good enough at the positioning battle to be quite as dominant as a Mark Cavendish in his prime or a Marcel Kittel in his prime, who Kittel was so much of a beast and so fast that I think he could screw up positioning a little bit. I don't know that Philipsen has quite that much. Of course, Philipsen, on the other hand, does have the ability to win or podium at 3 different classics, so monuments even.
I maybe reject the notion that there is a fastest, that is a proper way to describe, just because there are so many variables.
That's true.
They don't start. It's not like they do. It's not like they have separate lanes, and it's just who can put out the most watts with the least air resistance, right?
That's true. If they did,
I'm sports talk radioing you here. I'm not.
I see.
I'm not. Yeah.
In that case, bring it on. No, I actually do agree with you, though. I think it's probably unfair to even call anybody the fastest. But yeah, and the reason is what I've just said. It's that, Girmay has done such a great job of surfing wheels and finding the openings and finding the lanes and not getting caught behind crashes when the race is on the line. And yeah, he's just done everything right in that department.
Yep. I think I'm getting sidetracked a little bit, but with Girmay, the thing that really impressed me is how well he has kept himself in the points race in addition to winning 3 stages. I think he was second and fourth the 2 stages Philipsen won, and that's pretty good if you're chasing really points. Good. He's making, in addition to winning, which is the hardest thing to do, what everyone wants to do. He's also making good decisions about being in a place where he's going to get maximum or near maximum points against all of his rivals. He's not like Cavendish, who's either in it or out of it. It almost seems like in these things.
Oh yeah, definitely. Feast or famine.
And it's, I think that's got to be the hardest thing in the world to do, right? Because to win these stages, you do kind of need to be a little bit insane, have that kind of killer mindset. And that is really antithetical to thinking, well, I can still finish fourth here and lose fewer points to so-and-so.
I think, so Biniam Girmay has now won 3 stages of the Tour so far. He's in the lead in the points classification by a hefty amount. It's not guaranteed, but he's in the lead by a hefty amount. And if you go back to Sagan's career, he was also excellent at this. Every bunch sprint where we'd see Cav, Kittel, Greipel in some order, Sagan was fourth, or if one of those guys missed out, he was third. He did a really good job of that. For me, this is sort of the other side of the equation that I've been so impressed with Girmay is that he's gotten the wins. And I think it's combining both of those things that's so hard.
Yeah, that's
Phil Bauhaus is really good at finishing fourth.
Well, Ackerman has had 3 consecutive third places.
Ackerman, absolutely, yes.
Sprints. And that's amazing. There should be more articles about this. He should have more. He
deserves a lot of credit. But actually winning is so hard, and Girmay's done it 3 times. So being able to do both of those things, you're right. Absolutely right. Totally agree with you on this.
Yep.
Really impressive. And just not crashing even is impressive.
Yeah. You had mentioned you felt vindicated. I also felt vindicated because when you mentioned the expected goals, I mentioned that I think a lot of it was a factor of Mathieu van der Poel.
Yes.
What we saw on stage 10
whose lead out was just impeccable.
Vintage Mathieu van der Poel doing Mathieu van der Poel things.
Yes.
including absolutely stiffing the Anders Milka after the stage finish. He's like, Mathieu, we're live on Eurosport. Do you have anything to say? And Vanderpool just rides away.
I feel like I feel like Remco gets guff for his attitude. And the Vanderpool, like, that's an attitude that I feel like is what, like, people think Remco does.
Well, so Remco, he makes the mistake of like actually saying something.
That's the thing. He actually talks. He speaks his mind. That's the problem.
What are you gonna write about Vanderpool? He brusquely rode off. He
no commented us.
He was slightly standoffish.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a good point.
But I think honestly I make way too much. I'm way too critical of Remco, and I think he's riding a great tour. I said it last time. I'll say it again. I'm really. I take my hat off. Doff my cap a little bit.
Totally. Last sprinter thing, though, the relegation stuff. Well, we should point out that the jury they apparently told people they were going to come down harder on some of this stuff.
What does that even mean?
But yeah, I was just going to say, what does that mean?
There's a really oblique rule with no history of consistent enforcement, but they're going to be really strict about it. Like,
you're right. Yeah, in the middle of the race, like we're not strict the first few sprint stages, but we're gonna be now.
Now it's serious, guys. Now that we're out of the first week.
Yeah, it's hard to take this stuff seriously. It's hard not to find fault in it. And the other thing is that they don't make these calls. It's not balls and strikes. It's not a guy staring at a pitch coming in at 95 miles an hour and having to make a split-second decision on whether it was a ball or a strike.
Infinite replays.
Yeah, they can just sit there and roll back. And, like, as much as people complain about VAR getting stuff wrong, which it sometimes does, it feels like, and this is something that I think Kaylee said this in our chat, it feels like they get the sprint stuff wrong a lot. And they're playing it back ad infinitum, and they're still getting it wrong. I don't...
I think
something...
There's a lot of narrative. There's a lot of like, I think Philipsa is going to get much less leeway than another rider. I think if you win, you actually get a lot more leeway because they don't want to change the stage result and all that stuff. There's a subset of like, not rules, but assumptions, like soft traditions and conventions. And it's just like, why don't we write them all down? Decide which ones are good, decide which ones are bad, and then after 2 seasons or 3 seasons, come back and edit them based on what's happened in races, what riders say, what. Let's even get the broadcasters in. I can get the people who have to sell this race to make it interesting. Have everybody get kind of a seat at the table and say, this is the stuff that I think is good and really unique and fun about sprint. There's a whole episode of Tour de France Unchained about sprinting, and I thought it was really good, despite the fact that they just kind of skirted around the idea that there aren't really rules. Like I think Steve Chanel was like, you have to follow the rules, and that was the closest they came to indicating there was any sort of rule book here.
Right.
But they really captured so much of the essence of sprinting in that episode, and it would be great if we got together and kind of codified that to get the good stuff and get rid of the bad stuff as much as possible.
Yeah. No argument on that. Okay, let's talk GC. Let's talk about the narratives and where the narrative is now. Because I think a couple things. I mean, first of all, there's a really interesting thing that happened after stage 11 when Jonas Vingegaard won that sprint. And like you said, it felt like a watershed moment. It felt like he stopped the bleeding, and now the Visma juggernaut, you've awakened the monster. And the really interesting thing to me is that the bookmakers had Vingegaard as a very slight favorite to win the Tour de France after that. So it went from Pogacar being a slight favorite to Vingegaard, despite being more than a minute down. After that moment where it was like, oh wow, he's
at 1 second.
Yeah, it was such a tiny thing, but it was like the whole narrative was, oh wow, Vingegaard, they've awakened the monster, and he was the bookies' very, very slight favorite, and even by like the next day, I think it had evened out where they were both roughly the same odds, but still, people were clearly putting their money on Vingegaard to win the Tour de France after this. Is the long and short of this, and yet we didn't. We since then, we now know, even though Vingegaard has been impressive, And I think that's something that we should be clear about, is that he rode today's stage, for instance, incredibly. The Plateau de Baia finish, like I am always hesitant to put too much stock in these numbers, but like I think he rode this climb faster than anyone ever in history.
With something we've still kind of only hinted at is the like wire to wire racing, right? Like
Yes.
we got there's a not the same but pretty comparable stage from 2002. Just under 200 kilometers, Plateau de Baia finish, lots of intermediate climbs. And they raced it in 6 hours. And, these guys finished today in 5 hours and 13 minutes.
Yep.
And
And Pogacar's... So yeah, Vingegaard's time was the fastest ever that has ever been done on this climb, except for the fact that the guy who won the stage did it faster than him. So it's not... It reminded a little bit of the TT last year, where Pogacar lost a pretty hefty chunk of time. And it was like, oh... rough day for Pogacar, except for the fact that he crushed everybody,
else,
including
yeah.
Wout van Aert, who's really good at time trialing,
it's an uphill
except
time
for
trial.
Vingegaard. So a day where Vingegaard did a nice ride, a great ride, and yet Pogacar was unflappable. And over the last 2 days, really, both 14 and 15, Pogacar's legs have done all of the talking ever since that narrative moment. And I think one of the big things that I took out of these last two stages was really summed up really well by a story that Kaylee Fretz did over at escapecollective.com, which is, as much as we make of the tactics, and we love the tactics because they are, to me, tactics are the reason why I spend, 5 hours a day, basically, 100 days out of the year watching bike racing. And I would never do that for a single day for marathon, because tactics, and bike races, that's what makes but tactics make it interesting. And yet, no amount of tactics, no amount of tactical genius can really overcome the gap that I think Pogacar has right now in the ability, in the form. And I think one of the things that I took out of stage 14, yesterday's stage, was that UAE did a really great job tactically putting Adam Yates up the road. I thought that was really smart, and it was something that was unsuspecting. We haven't seen them send Yates up the road like that. We've seen them use Yates, but that was a really smart thing to do. I don't know that it would have made a difference though. It was really smart. Would it have mattered if they didn't do that? I don't know.
It's very interesting to see how the different UAE riders will talk to the press afterwards. Adam Yates recalls this moment where Pogacar allegedly tells him spur of the moment, "Hey, you need to attack, Adam." And Adam says, and I'm like, "What are you on about?" This is what a ridiculous idea. Whereas Almeida was like, this wasn't the plan, but it was one of the plans. This was stuff they had talked about earlier. And so you sort of kind of have to wonder what the actual, if there is an actual plan there. I mean, it's very, Yates made it seem like this was sort of how Tadej likes to race, and that would sync with basically everything I've observed about Pogacar for the past 7 years. 7 years? When was his first? When did he win Tour of California? 2017?
Oof. I was there. 2018? 2019.
Man, 5 years.
Yeah. I guess it wasn't that long ago.
It's a long 5 years, Dane.
It was 2019. Bernal won the year before that. Yeah, the last 2 years of Tour of California, Bernal, Pogacar, race is defunct. How sad. Anyway, by the same token, though, I mean, when we saw Visma today, they did what I think should have done. Yeah. They tried to make it hard. I think Visma's whole strategy, going back to strategy versus tactics, was the 3 weeks of this race, we're going to try to hit Pogacar on a very select few stages, because this is what worked last year. Last year, it was a tight race, right up until it wasn't. And then Vingegaard won by a boatload of time.
More than the year before.
Yeah, because they had selected those stages to make the big difference, and they made a huge difference. And I think that was their plan again this year. And I think they did everything right on today's stage with the... you go to the tour with the army you have, Donald Rumsfeld. And I think unfortunately, they didn't have Sepp Kuss, but even if the plan had gone to perfection, I think Pogacar's still going to get a bunch of time.
You never know, right? Because
we never know.
You could have made that assumption for stage 11 too. And I think that was actually another data point that may have informed their strategy for the stage 15 for today, because they had a day that was real hard, where the action started early, where there was a lot of work, a lot of time investment, kind of prior to the final climbs. And so on paper, based on the data, the most recent data, that would be the way to get some time back on Pogacar here, and just didn't work out for him today. And it's on any given day in July, you either win or you lose, right? And
I do think we should point this out. I mean, we'll talk about this in a second when we close the show by looking at what's ahead. The race is not over, and I think that's something worth pointing out.
I specifically said when I was trying to make headlines, I didn't want to do the race.
It does feel like there is an obvious favorite now, because there is. But, first and foremost, Pogacar could still crash or get sick. I mean, that is an inevitable, unavoidable thing that can happen to people on a bike race.
It happened to one of his teammates. They're getting sick, not the. I should specify. There's been a lot of COVID and other ailments kind of running around the peloton, and enough to the point that they have reinstated kind of a mask mandate, at least for the media, which, judging from the post-line footage I saw, is getting mixed adherence. So they're not being super strict about it, but definitely a lot of people in masks. And I think a lot of people trying not to get sick in the last week of a really hard bike race.
Right, yeah. And so that could happen. And then, of course, it's not outside the realm of possibility that there will be a hot day in the Alps where, I'm gone. I'm done. I've exploded. That could happen.
And it was interesting to see on stage 11 how much that memory played into kind of the conversation, and maybe even conspiracy theories in terms of, why did Pogacar look so strong and then get caught? Did he feed wrong? Was there something wrong with his bike? And it's maybe, Vingegaard was like, I can't go this hard right now, but maybe I can go hard later.
Right.
And
yeah.
he could.
Right.
So.
One other talking point. So we've talked about Evenepoel. He's done a great job, great first tour. I think he has proven that he is. I honestly think he is what we thought he was.
Well, what everyone said he was, for the most part.
He's a Grand Tour contender insofar as anyone who is not Pogacar and Vingegaard or Tour de France. He's a Tour de France contender. He's already won a Grand Tour. He's a Tour de France contender in so much as anyone who's not Vingegaard and Pogacar can be, right? And that's a lot to be. I think you can win a tour being as good as Evenepoel is. We've seen this for a handful of times at the Tour de France. I think the third best guy at the moment has won the tour. I believe that's what happened in 2014. I'm sure other people would disagree with me, but I think that was Nibali at the time. I think Evenepoel has done a great job. I also want to talk about his teammate, because I think Mikel Landa is a great example of why you see sort of second-tier GC riders sign on to be domestiques. And it's, for years, I would see people be frustrated that, the nth rider would go to Sky. The guy, the nth, fifth or sixth place finisher at whatever Grand Tour would then sign with Sky. And I think Mikel Landa is a great example of sort of the reason that you might do that, which is, if things continue as they are at the moment at the Tour de France, Mikel Landa is going to finish. He's currently fifth as of the second rest day. That's as good as he probably would do at any tour ever, whether he's riding for himself or not.
What is his best?
I think his best ever at the Tour de France is fourth. He was fourth. Yeah, I'll confirm. Yeah, 2020 he was fourth. And his best ever at any Grand Tour, he's been third at the Giro twice. So he's been a great teammate to Evenepoel. And then he just keeps riding, and he can still end up finishing in the top 5 of Grand Tour. So it seems like a pretty good deal to go ride for somebody else. You get all the praise of being a friendly teammate. You could still finish in the top 5. Maybe he gets fewer chances to go for stages, but we've seen this tour that the breakaway guys don't get allowed to win stages anyway. So yeah, I think it's a good example of why you might go sign to be a support rider. Good on you, Mikel Landa. All right. Let's get away from the Tour for a bit. Cosmo, what is the headline from the Giro d'Italia Women 2024?
Headline for the women's Giro, a contender once is a contender always. It seems like women's cycling is in a place where you have people who win Flanders, who win Roubaix, competing against each other for GC titles at week-long stage races, which is cool, I think. I like seeing the best riders race against the best riders as often as they can. Like, you've got a battle between Lotte Kopecky and Elisa Longo Borghini, who have contended at classics against each other. They both, I mean, the thing I'm getting at is it's a very kind of old school vibe, and you can see the sport kind of maturing. And you had Niamh Fisher-Black and Nev Bradbury both winning stages, both kind of climbery rider types. And it's you're kind of moving away from this Marianne Vos wins everything pattern. I think that's really fun.
Yeah, Kopecky is just a special rider who, it's true of Longo Borghini as well as I think was confirmed in this Giro. The fact that she could win Flanders and the Giro, the fact that Kopecky could win Roubaix and finish second at the Giro. I mean, it's pretty special. For more, and as I've said, we've got daily. There have been awesome rider diaries coming in from the race. Abby, Mickey, and company over at Wheel Talk have more. One final Giro minisode, as they're called, and then I'm sure there'll be another big show coming up as well. So for more on the women's Giro, which, as you said, was won by Elisa Longo Borghini, head on over to Wheel Talk. Cosmo, let's talk about the last couple of stages here of the Tour de France. What's ahead? At the 2024 Tour, we are going to be heading back in the direction of the Alps, which is funny because we did kind of go through them because of the whole Italy thing.
Yep. Someone was saying something about wait for the Alps. I'm like, didn't we already?
Yeah, we technically kind of already. I mean, we did the Galibier, right, on stage 4. Well, we didn't do it. Right. So stage 16, probably a sprinter's day. They're going to finish in Nîmes, and as I pointed out in the preview, it could be pretty hot. Stage 17, man, it looks like a breakaway day. It's got some climbs near the finish. I don't know if breakaways are allowed to win anymore on climber days at the Tour de France.
I think we specifically said that today was going to be a breakaway day for sure.
We did.
And it didn't happen.
And I thought that it was. And now, both Tadej Pogacar and Jonas Vingegaard are strong reasons why that doesn't happen anymore. Another day, stage 18 looks like a great breakaway day. And basically, every time you see gap in any stage, I feel like it's a good breakaway day. That's a good assumption. I don't know. Possible that it could be a reduced sprint. And then we'll start to see the climbers come to the fore again on stages 19 and 20, because 19 is a real doozy. A lot of altitude on 19. A lot of elevation above sea level is what I'm talking about. 2 ore category climbs, and then they finish with the Isola 2000 ski station. The highest they get is 2,800 meters, which is not nothing. That's
how much is that in cool American units?
In cool American units, that's 9,192.9 feet.
That's up there.
That's way up there. Yeah. So that is some elevation. That's the kind of elevation that can have a huge impact on people. And that'll be interesting to see how that goes. That's the middle climb of that day. And then Isola 2000 goes up to, wait for it, 2,000 meters. So elevation on stage 19 in the Alps, and then stage 20 back again in the Alps. This one, it's kind of it's a Paris-Nice style stage. First of all, they start in Nice, and second of all, there's a bunch of Cat 1 climbs, which is what you get a lot at Paris-Nice. I think we're going to see more action. I would imagine Visma will try again to, hit Pogacar hard, but there's a lot of ground to make up. I think that
there's also a final day TT.
Yes. So after the climbers are at the fore in those 2 stages, they're probably going to come to the fore one last time, because the TT has a climb in the middle of it, first of all. And second of all, the 3 best time trialists in the race right now are probably Pogacar, Vingegaard, and Evenepoel.
What about Kevin Vacquelin? Come on, your boy.
Good point. I should not have disrespected Kevin that way. It's the final time trial from Monaco to Nice. Does have a Cat 2 climb in it. Then they do a little trip over the Col d'Ez. not a flat TT. So those last 3 stages of the tour are going to be very decisive for the GC, except for the fact that, Pogacar already has a huge lead.
3 minutes
so maybe
and 9
they're not gonna
seconds, which is still, if you bonk,
Yes. That is a surmountable advantage if Pogacar has a jour sans, and if Vingegaard has a good day.
He loses, a minute in each of those uphill finishes and a minute in the TT.
Right.
Not out of the question.
If the fatigue of racing the Giro shows up, which maybe it will never show up. But what if it does?
He was very, he did the Giro and he's like, cool, I'm just hang out and detrain for a little bit.
Yeah, he did he clearly did a good job, right, with managing that because of the form that he's on. And I think we saw, based on the climbing times today, based on just things that we've seen throughout the race so far, I don't think Vingegaard is 100% from his injury, but I think he's pretty good. And I think Pogacar's just flying, and it's really impressive. But yeah, that Isola 2000 day, it's hard enough. It's certainly possible that we could still see the narrative change again. I don't think it's going to happen. I doubt that will happen, but I think it's possible. And then, there is a final time trial, and we have seen a time trial make a pretty big difference to a Slovenian GC rider. Unfortunately for said guy, he's not in this race anymore. Right. Those are the final stages of the 2024 Tour. By the next time we podcast, we will know who the 2024 Men's Tour champion is, which is pretty exciting. And with that, I will say, head on over to escapecollective.com. Check out all the stories we've got from the final week. I hope you have a chance to listen to all of our shows. Wheel Talk, the Tour Dailies, Geek Warning, Performance Process, all those things. And I hope you have a chance to enjoy our coverage of, all things cycling, really. We will see you in a week, or you'll hear us at least. I'm Dane Cash. And who are you? What was this?
I'm Cosmo Catalano. That was the How the Race Was Won podcast.